Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hi, Maddie. Welcome back to the Quest podcast.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for having me.
So it seems like I just had you on not long ago for an interview, but
it feels like that.
It feels like that. It's been like 6 months though. But we're back for a completely different reason. It's because we have joined forces to put out a podcast of our own about tennis. And we're going to talk about that today. And normally, under normal circumstances, I usually have the host of a podcast I produced come on before we launch the podcast. So that way some of my fans will bleed over and subscribe to the new one. But this was a really busy year for me. So your podcast and Edita's Danceology podcast, I didn't get to do that with. So I brought Edita on at the end of her season. And as of the recording of this episode, we're really about halfway through our first season. So this show is called Beyond the Match, and you are the host of it.
Yes. And you're my producer. And it's crazy whenever you say that. I think back to whenever you had me on your show for the first time and we did the first interview. And it was right after that you and I got connected even more. And then Beyond the Match has really spun since then. And that was really, I guess, the beginning of it all.
Yeah. And it's funny because my journey in tennis sort of like ended because I just ran out of people to play tennis with. Right. so I played in middle school and high school and a little bit when I got out of high school. And then I got busy with life, and every place I traveled to or things I got involved in, there was just no one to play. So the game sort of ended because you kind of have to, it's kind of a two-person thing, right? So you can only hit against ball machines for so long before it bores you.
Ball machine or a wall.
Yeah.
It's only therapeutic for so long before you want some competition.
So when it got away from me, the game got away from me, I just kind of quit tuning in. Like I was barely paying attention to even who the players were. But after meeting you, you sort of like breathed some new life into this for me. And tennis is probably my favorite sport. So I thought, well, this is a great way for me to get back into it, to not only start playing again, but to really get the knowledge back that I had before and then find out who's who and do that, through knowing you and through producing this podcast that has up and coming people and, legends of the sport and things like that would come through. I thought that would be very cool. So I do thank you for that, like reigniting this for me.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it's all about, getting more people either involved from the beginner stages if they haven't known anything about it, or like you getting back into it. That makes me so happy.
And I think I've said this many times that there's very few sports that you can really do your whole life, that you can play when you're little and you can play when you're old. And tennis is one of those sports that you can be an older man and still be out on the court and play. In golf and maybe just a handful of other things, but you really can't be a man in your 60s or older out playing basketball or soccer or football anymore. You really put yourself in danger, right?
Yeah, they say racket sports are the sports that add the most years to your life. And I think, I don't want to be wrong on this, but I think that tennis is the number one sport that adds the most years to your life. So it is definitely a good lifelong sport to play.
Yeah, for sure. So after our interview, I thought, well, I'm going to dust off the old tennis racket, and start to play more. And no sooner than I started getting back into the game, an unrelated injury hit me where I kind of damaged my knee. So I was sort of like out of commission for almost 4 months, letting my knee heal. Just it was a meniscus tear that was terrible. Like just bad enough to where it could have surgery, but it didn't really need to have it. So it was one of those really long healing processes.
Yeah. And it's all better now?
It is better now. But I told you, we spoke yesterday, the day before, and I said I went out on the tennis court for the first time since it's fully healed And I really felt the limitations of the knee when I was out on the court. The audience knows I'm 54 years old, and I've never taken a bad injury, like ever, for anything. Like a busted finger one time, but like no broken bones, nothing torn really bad. So I made it that long before I damaged my knee.
Yep, and tennis will do that to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to ask, did you warm up the day that you hurt your knee?
Yeah.
Did you warm up or did you start? Yeah. You did.
And I didn't, and to clarify, I didn't hurt my knee playing tennis. I hurt it putting in a kitchen sink.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I totally misunderstood that. And I thought you heard it on the tennis court.
No. I actually heard it because I had to like do all the plumbing underneath the sink and all this stuff. And I was all twisted up and I had my knee at a weird angle. And I either damaged it there or I damaged it like pulling the old cast iron sink out. Like it could have been all the weight on my knee. So I didn't damage it with tennis at all. I damaged it another way. But this was the first time I went out and played tennis since I hurt my knee. And I could really tell in my movements, like, wow, this is still a little weak. I really need to probably be careful.
I had my last surgery on my knee. I want to say like 5 years ago. And I mean, I still feel it all the time. And it wasn't even a major surgery. It wasn't like a meniscus or ACL. It was something really small. And I mean, I still feel it. Like it just like locks up sometimes. But then like once it does this like weird clicking thing, it's almost like a release. Yeah. And then it's able to have like normal range of motion again. But till it does that click thing, I don't even know what to call it. It's very limited and kind of painful.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine, when I damaged my knee, it would like click and then it would relieve the pressure, the pain or whatever, like you were saying, but I still have a nagging little click in there. There is a nagging little click but I've got the full range of motion of my knee, but I will have to probably take care of it. But between that and my shoulder, maybe my serves might be weaker.
Push hands, go underarm.
Could. I mean, practically relearning. Why not learn with the left hand, right? But it's really truly been a joy to step back into this and like see how the game has changed since I have played it originally and to see the faces come through. So as I said earlier, we're halfway through the first season as of the airing of this interview. And it's been a really exciting time to kind of just see who's interested and see these people come on and talk about their journeys. And we called this Beyond the Match. And I wanted you to tell the audience why we called it that and why this isn't a typical tennis podcast, what we do that's different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you know, a lot went into us choosing a name that really shows what the podcast is going to be about. And a lot of the tennis podcasts that I hear, they talk about what's currently going on in tournaments. They talk about the specific players, the strategies, the in-depth tennis tactics and things like that. Or they're just players that are like friends with each other, having casual conversations and just, I don't want to say goofing off, but definitely like a more lighthearted type of tone to the podcast. And so ours is a bit different than that. Beyond the Match, as the name suggests, talks about, a lot that goes on behind the scenes in the world of tennis and all the things that tennis players face from a very young age throughout really their entire tennis career. Because right now, I would say there's a lot of misconceptions about the sport. One like thing I can point out there is there's only about 100 men and 100 women that make a living in the sport. And it's one of the most popular sports in the world. So to think that there's only 200 people in the world making a living from it that are players is pretty crazy. And a lot of that has to do with the structure of the sport, the lifestyle, the amount of travel required, the expenses that are all on the players. They're, not run by the federation. That's not all, given to the players. So then that puts a lot of emotional, physical tolls on players. And I guess that's more of the negative side of things that whenever you think of Beyond the Match. But then, of course, there are a lot of highlights too. There are a lot of opportunities. whether it be through collegiate tennis. We've had a few guests now that have come through the college tennis world. And yeah, so we really just go more into depth about all the different avenues and things that go on behind the scenes.
For sure. I think, and I think tennis isn't necessarily unique in this aspect. I think it happens probably in any number of athletics, but beyond the match, what's fascinating about this and what I've kind of gleaned from the personalities of people that have come through is, people have relationship issues. They have problems at home. They certainly have health problems. And all of these things really affect, there's a physical game here, but there's also a mental game here. And I remember you telling me one time how really physically, when you're in maybe the top 50 or top 100, you're all pretty much equal in terms of you're just physically being in peak shape. What separates people is their mental game. Do you remember telling me that?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
I had Paulina Edmonds, who is a former Olympic figure skater, on my podcast as I'm amping up toward these 100 episodes that I've done. And she was a very popular guest in my first season, and I had her come back, and I asked her that question. I said, what separates maybe the top 20, 50 girls in women's figure skating when they probably all are at their peak physical conditioning? And she said, it's absolutely the mental game. She said, you can defeat yourself before you ever walk on the ice.
That's so true for tennis as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I find fascinating because, people have stuff going on in their lives before they ever walk out on the court. And we're getting that here. We're definitely getting that because not only are you maybe nervous about your competitor or who you're competing against, you might have just had a fight with your girlfriend and before you walk on the court, or you might, someone said something to you that was off color that you didn't like. And all of these things affect your game too, not to mention the money aspect and the travel and the stress of all of those things and all those rules and all of that.
Oh, absolutely. Even a bad call from a ref during a match
could spin you in a different direction.
Off. If you're already at a place where you're tired from traveling to multiple countries in a week, away from home for so many weeks, you're stressing the financials, already pissed off going onto the court, the ref makes a bad call, you might lose it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then everything else, once you look back, it's like, I've seen people do it and then they've freaked out over a call, thrown the match for themselves. And then they're like, wow, I was so stressed about all those things that I let that cost me the match. And then that made all the sacrifices kind of worthless because I didn't even compete hard anyways.
I said this in our previous interview, if anyone wants to go back and listen to it. But I said, I was a terrible high school tennis player. I was a great tennis player when I was in high school, but I was terrible as a competitive tennis player because I would defeat myself before I ever started playing. My mental game was so bad. If I was just playing with friends, we had a practice, I could give it my all and I'd be great. There was no pressure. But man, once there was a match, the pressure would just kill me. It would just destroy me.
People struggle with that, even at pretty high level of the sport, people struggle with that too still. And one of my players the other day, actually, that I coached this girl, and she's a Division I college tennis player right now going into her junior year. And we're talking a lot about confidence with her because she is exactly like you just described. She can defeat herself before she steps on the court. So to try to inspire her, I sent her a quote. And the quote is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Do you understand that quote when I say it?
Yeah. I just heard that somewhere. Where was that at? Was it an episode of The Office? I heard it in.
Potentially. I have not watched all of The Office.
I think Michael Scott said that was what he lived by.
Oh, no.
A quote he lived by.
It's not a good one.
I know. And then someone turns to him and says, are you sure about that?
Oh, that's so funny.
I'm pretty sure they used that quote in The Office, yeah.
That's hysterical. Yeah,
I'm sure it didn't originate there.
Believe in yourself,
Yeah. Now, see, I don't think that'll happen to me again because as I've grown up, I've become an incredible narcissist. And now I walk on the court with an incredible ego now. Like I've won before I've ever even served the ball.
Yeah. You know what, though? That makes me think of like the college tennis world. And a lot of the times you can get a team and you know, we've talked about this in some of the episodes as well, but culture within a team on college tennis teams is really, really important. And a lot of the time you'll get so many of the players buying in, but then you get this one that is like quite selfish, quite hard-headed, and a lot of the time they're the best player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've seen that on numerous teams. And so maybe it is a little bit better that as you're getting older, you're turning into more of a narcissist.
This is coming out in a future book of mine, but I argue this point a lot, that I think people have given narcissism a really negative connotation. I feel that narcissism can make a person bulletproof, like literally make them bulletproof. Like, you know, you could be exempt from anything. You can't be torn down by anything. And I think it could be an upper level of a protection mechanism for you. And you know, not the greatest example in the world, but Donald Trump is like an incredible narcissist. He has been for, you know, a large period of his life. But look at all the attacks that he's withstood. Most people couldn't have withstood a single attack against you in the way that he's had it. The press has torn him down. Legal has torn him down. You know, everyone's going to have. He almost was killed 2 weeks ago, and I think it's very interesting that how does a person just keep moving forward, being attacked so much when some people, if one person at the grocery store said something wrong to him, they're in tears. So I feel like, you know what, it is a protective mechanism. Whether it's good or bad, I think is subject to interpretation. But I think if you walk on the court and you know that you're, you know, I think you can manifest a victory, you know.
That's such an interesting take. But yeah, I mean, I think in sports and specifically tennis, that level of self-belief and confidence can take you really far.
I wonder, you know, how many competitors would compete against the Williams sisters and just think, well, yeah, I'm going home quick tonight. You know, how many people walked on and said, I'm going to beat these girls, versus the ones that were like, yeah, this is going to be brutal. It's going to be humiliating for me. You know, like how many people were defeated before they ever played versus accepting the challenge of, I'm going to give her a run today.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it absolutely does. I mean, people, I'm sure, would see their names in the draw and think, oh, crap. That makes me think right now, the Olympics, as we film this, the Olympics are about to take place, and Rafael Nadal is playing. And his opponent, Matt Ebden, posted something on Instagram, a funny video of his reaction to seeing the draw. I don't know if it was his real reaction or not, but essentially it was him just looking at the draw and then his face like, WTF. So, like, I mean, that shows his mindset going into the match, though. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure maybe he's going to turn it on when he steps on the court. Some players are very much capable of doing that, but that's pretty difficult to do. Yeah.
As of this recording, I think we're like 5 or 6 episodes into the season. What have been some of the biggest takeaways for you with our guests? What surprised you that someone has said, or their take on the sport?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know how surprising it is for me, because I've seen it, my whole life. I've just had these conversations with people even before we started recording the podcast, but there are just some common themes. And one of them I would say is like having a purpose. One of them has been kind of what we just spoke about to some degree, but tennis players needing to be really selfish. And then a lot of it has been like on kind of the negative side of the sport, and just like some of the struggles that players face and the difficulties. And I think it's really a good thing to be talked about, though, because there are a lot of things within the tennis world that, there's more organizations being formed right now, even by the players, that they're trying to change a lot of these things that would alleviate a lot of these stressors and mental pressures from the athletes. So I would say, like, I guess the degree that even the top players have to remind themselves about things, about being confident and remembering their purpose, because I think the average person would think that comes quite naturally to athletes of such a high level, but it's not always, and it does need to be practiced. And having that confidence and keeping it is really a skill, and it needs to be practiced even by them.
I see. That's good. That's good. Yeah, I do. I agree with that. There have been some common themes with our guests
Yeah.
so far. It's been an
Yes.
exciting season. What what do you think? I know pickleball is really giving tennis a run for its money,
Yeah, it is.
and you like pickleball. I'm totally against pickleball. My prediction is that you're going to see all the pickleball equipment will be in yard sales in 2 to 3 years. It'll be one of those things where it's just everyone puts all their crap out for sale, getting rid of it. The
I think
fad will
that'll
be over.
depend on the rate of injury that people that play pickleball keep having, because a lot of people keep getting injured.
Yeah, well, that too, for sure.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if people will lose interest, if it'll be one of those things that's just a summer thing that they picked up with their kids and then it's over and everyone loses interest and moves on. And then we're left with a bunch of pickleball courts all over the country that are converted tennis
Yeah.
courts. But, I kind of remember this before with other sports like handball. There used to be handball courts everywhere. There were racquetball courts all over the place. There were other sports that were kind of ball racket type sports that it just all went away. And it's hard to
I didn't
even
even know
find some.
that.
Yeah. Racquetball courts are really hard to find. And racquetball is still the sport never went away, but
Yeah.
it's really difficult to find a place to play racquetball in most cities. And racquetball was so popular that there would be racquetball courts in every gym. Like if you had a gym membership, there would be 2 racquetball courts there.
Yeah.
It was so popular.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that went away. So, part of me hopes that it drifts away because I think the organizers of tennis are a little scared of this trend.
That's
The-
interesting because I have heard some people, like, crazy enough, I can't even remember who, but I've heard some of the people that are like commentators of tennis tournaments talking about that, and that they're really like afraid for the sport and that tennis has to do something. I don't know. I just think that they can live side by side. And if pickleball fades out,
I
so
don't
be
know.
it.
Man, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that you can't have multiple racket-based sports side by side. Someone's going to win.
Mm.
I think that's the key because the thing with racquetball was I was cocky when I was in high school and I thought, oh, I'll just play racquetball too. Like I had an uncle that played racquetball, but then it screwed up my tennis game so much because racquetball is so much using the wrist constantly
Yeah.
that you really disrupt your tennis game because they're different forms
Yeah.
of stuff. I just can't think that you could have that many competitors,
Yeah.
with one has to win out.
I guess we'll see. I don't see tennis fully going anywhere. I think it's so rich in tradition and it has such nice history behind it too. And
If they convert tennis courts to be pickleball courts, it will affect it because now there's fewer places for people to play, learn,
yeah,
I think it could.
that's true. I hope it doesn't
Let's
happen.
let's revisit this conversation in 3 years and
Yeah, we need to, and we'll come
we'll
back to
see
this.
if pickleball is around. I'm curious, do you feel tennis is a strong sport now? Is it, like you said at the beginning, it is a popular sport. It's also one of the richest sports. But do you feel its popularity is waning or it's on the increase or where do you think it's at right now on the world stage?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. Like, I know people a lot of the time in the United States see it as a richer sport, which of course here it is. But whenever you go to a lot of the other countries that I've been and I've played tennis, it doesn't have that. I mean, yes, the racket itself is a lot, but then the cost to play, the price of lessons, the ways of getting to tournaments, it's all a lot cheaper in other countries. And it's just a really, really different structure of the sport in a lot of places. Like a lot of my even college teammates, their families really didn't have a ton of money. And I bet if they had grown up in the United States, they wouldn't have probably played to the level that they did. But because they came from, a different part of the world, they were able to. But in terms of popularity of the sport, I haven't checked numbers recently, so I really don't know for sure on like viewership and things like that. But I do think that people like Nick Kyrgios, someone like Coco Gauff, these like very strong, like good for the media type people, I would say. Even Marta Kostyuk, I've seen her on like so many things for some of the outfits that she's worn with Wilson recently. I think that's really good for the sport. And I think even though it's through social media and maybe just like little clips here and there, that's bringing eyes to the sport. Emma Raducanu is another one who a couple of years back after her run brought a lot of eyes to the sport. Carlos Alcaraz, same thing. So I think that these faces in the sport are doing a lot in terms of popularity.
Yeah. What about the Netflix Cup? Did you, what kind of, did you ever, because I know we talked about that. I was watching it. I think you were out on the courts and I was watching it and telling you about it. But did you ever have a chance to?
With, Rafa and Alcaraz.
Yeah. Did you wind up watching it?
Yes, I did.
Was that a gimmick, publicity stunt? Was it just, you think Netflix will do this again? Was it fun? Was it interesting to see the Vegas experience with the dark court, the lights going and all, like all the celebrities? Like, what did that do for the sport?
I mean, I think it's eyes on the sport, and I think that's a good thing. Like, I wouldn't say that it's like a match that you would be able to like count on either of their records for anything, because it's definitely more of an exhibition vibe to it and a lot more fun and, you know, just different crowd, different atmosphere, arena, all of it. So, and the fact that it was one of the first ever live on Netflix things, I thought was really, really cool for the sport too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good to know. You know, obviously, I think generationally, you see great players that are going out and you see people coming up that people get excited about. So, but I'm always curious, when it loses its luster, like when are there weaker people and like no one's talking about tennis.
Yeah. Thankfully right now, I don't feel like that's happening. I think that there's a lot of the up and coming players that are like very, very good faces of the sport. And especially right now, even on the women's side, the Americans, there's, I want to say it's 5 American women in the top 15.
You mentioned, you actually made me think of a question I wanted to ask. And, I brought this up, I think, with Paulina when I interviewed her, is American figure skaters, women, they haven't had a gold medalist since Sarah Hughes, which has been almost 25 years ago. The women aren't pushing out these great skaters like they used to. There's been a decline for whatever reason in that sport. Is that the same? Is tennis weaker in America for like bringing out champions? Like, who was our last great American player that was winning titles, was a champion?
That's a really good question. I mean, obviously on the women's side, Serena did so much. On the men's side, gosh, I don't want to get this wrong and like miss someone, but I'm thinking who won the last slam. It couldn't have been Andy Roddick.
Yeah. Anyways, it seems like it's been a while, and maybe it hasn't been as long
ago. Then crap. But I will say, on the men's side right now, there are a lot of pretty good Americans too.
Yeah,
I say pretty good. They're like top 15, 20 in the world.
Sure.
So I do think that there's some very prominent players. I don't see them winning slams right now. I think that's going to be really difficult to do with like Alcaraz and Sinner. I just see them going a lot further and taking out people a lot earlier before they give them a chance to get to the final rounds. But
for sure.
Yeah. You see here and there, like I think Ben Shelton made a semifinal of a slam. Tommy Paul made quarters or semis. I actually think he might have made semis. So you see them make runs here and there, but haven't quite gotten to the finish line. Unless I'm just like totally blanking and forgetting someone. That's my little disclaimer.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to the statistics right now to
I will say in doubles, Taylor Townsend just won Wimbledon. Yeah. So that's a title for an American at Wimbledon.
For sure. Yeah. So Madi, tell everyone how they can find Beyond the Match and kind of like where are we at? Tell everyone social media, all that good stuff.
We are everywhere. So wherever you listen to your podcasts, we are there. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere else, really. On Instagram, we are Beyond the Match Podcast. And then my personal Instagram, my tennis Instagram is at CEO of Tennis.
Good. Now, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to see if I can remember these. You do this. We haven't put these out yet. But you do these little funny things at the end of our interviews with all of the guests, asking them these questions, and you answer with, yes, no, maybe so, right?
Yes.
I'm going to turn the tables on you for this one. And I'm going to try and remember them all because I don't have them all written down. So you might have to go and give me some of the others.
Okay.
So the first one, have you ever drank soda during a match?
Yes.
What kind of soda, out of curiosity? Do you have a Coke?
Yes.
Really? Okay. Have you ever drank alcohol during a match?
No, not during, but right before I've stepped on court. Yes.
Oh.
Rough time of my life. We don't need to revisit.
Alcohol was in the bloodstream while you were playing. See?
Oh, yeah. There were some mimosas.
Funny. Okay. Have you ever overruled your doubles partner's call?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever cursed at a referee?
Probably, but not to where they could hear it.
Have you ever broken a racket?
Yes.
Have you ever broken multiple rackets during a match?
Maybe.
Have you ever, and I want to actually kind of recraft this. Have you ever thrown a racket? Is it the same thing, breaking one, thrown one?
They're different. You can throw it and not break it, and then you can break it without really throwing it. But yes, I have thrown my racket.
Have you thrown it more than you've broken it?
Yes.
We might want to add that one in.
That's true.
What ones am I forgetting? There couldn't be very many more. Did I get them all?
If I've cheated an opponent.
If you've cheated an opponent, right.
That's
always your first one. That's always your first question.
And we talked about changing that, and I forgot to change it. I've cheated when they've cheated me first. Like if I'm 100% sure that they're not just accidentally making a bad call and they have cheated me, then you got to cheat them back.
Gotcha. Did I get them all? Was that all? Was that all the questions?
I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. I have to have them in front of me, but I think that was like...
There's only like 5.
Have you ever not shook an opponent's hand after a match is one of them.
Right.
I've never done that.
And you also have you ever made your team run laps in college? Is that what was that?
Oh, yes. Have I ever made my team run? Yeah, I made my team run, and it was always for really silly stuff, like accidentally wearing the wrong color t-shirt. And you have team rules of like what you're supposed to wear, and I would get my days of the week confused.
Well, now you've heard it from Madi Harrison, her answers to these questions, which hopefully are going to go out on YouTube or virally at some point when you put all their fun answers out there.
Yes.
There's been some really interesting ones. But Madi, thanks for taking the time today to come out and talk about our podcast, because it's so much fun, and it's really helped me want to get back into the game, and I couldn't be doing it with a better person.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much too. And I couldn't be doing it without all your help.
So everyone look forward to the last 6 or 7 episodes of the first season. Then we'll be on a little bit of a break, and we'll come back for season 2 next year. And like she said, you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all those services all around the world.
Yes. Tune in and learn about tennis. For
sure. And until next time, hope you come back after my 100th episode in my season 7, and we get to talk about this again.
Yes, for sure will. Thank you so much, Todd.
I'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Bye.
Metacortex Publishing hopes that you've enjoyed this presentation.
Please take a moment to listen to some other podcast offerings from Metacortex Publishing.
The Danceology podcast interviews the great masters of dance, the working professionals starring in today's most exciting shows, and the rising stars ready to amp up the craft. I'm your host, Edyta Stawenska from Dancing with the Stars. Join me as I dive into the world of dance, uncovering unique stories and the fascinating personalities of industry professionals on Danceology.
Hi, I'm Father Daniel Duplantis, a Catholic priest, martial artist, and host of the Karate Priest podcast. Have you ever wondered what the church teaches about different topics? Are you a martial arts enthusiast or just someone who wants to learn more about martial arts? I'd like to invite you to join me and many guests on my podcast as we cover topics of faith, everyday living, and martial arts on the Karate Priest podcast.
The No Earthly Explanation podcast investigates the things that are unexplainable, hosted by world-renowned investigative researcher Donald R. Schmidt and scientist Ellie Ringo. Follow them as they look for evidence for things that have no earthly explanation. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Every year, tennis players from around the world compete for excellence, triumphing against all odds to emerge the champions. I'm your host, Madi Harrison. Join me as I get up close and personal with these dynamic individuals and find out what it takes to go for greatness. Let's go beyond the match.
Cult Following is a podcast that studies the personalities and common traits of cult leaders and their followers. Get the real story behind these infamous and oftentimes tragic cults from a new perspective, through exhaustive research, and from interviews with people that were there. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hi everybody, I'm Amber Rose, the religious hippie, and I host the podcast A Catholic's Perspective. Join me every 2 weeks as I release episodes targeted towards helping young Catholics navigate their ever-changing secular world while staying strong in their faith. Whether you are a Catholic or not, all are welcome here. So if this is something that interests you, feel free to tune in. You can find A Catholic's Perspective on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I hope to see you there. Bye!
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fischer and Anthony Smith and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for Metacortex Publishing at metacortexpublishing.com or find us on social media for other unique content.